I was looking for something easy, nothing too intense. Just a quick 5-mile loop to stretch my legs and let my husky burn some energy. She's overly friendly and doesn't understand the concept of danger. She thinks everyone is her best friend. I'd planned on taking a normal trail at a park in Southern California, one I'd done a few times before, but that morning I was feeling curious. There was this other path that branched off from the main trail. It led past a small, "You are now leaving the national park" sign and wrapped around a reservoir. It wasn't technically closed or anything, just rarely used. I'd seen it on maps and figured it might make for a quieter, more peaceful hike. It was a weekday morning, sunny but not hot, and the air still felt a little cool in the shade. I hadn't passed anyone on the trail in at least 20 minutes. No birds chirping either, just the sound of my boots on dirt, my huskies breathing and nails clicking on the path, and the occasional rustle of dry leaves. It was nice, quiet, maybe too quiet. I wasn't really nervous yet, just alert. I don't normally get anxious in the outdoors, especially with a dog, but the further we went from the main area, the more I felt exposed. The trail narrowed as it curved along a hillside. The brush was taller on both sides now, sage, dry buckwheat, manzanita. A few jackrabbits darted out every now and then and made my husky perk up. She tried to chase one at some point, tugging hard enough that I had to hold her leash with both hands. I laughed and caught my breath, shaking off the weird feeling in my chest. We came around a bend, and that's when I saw him. A man sitting on a flat rock just off the trail. He wasn't eating or resting or doing anything you'd expect from a hiker. He was drinking a can of beer, not a bottle of water, and wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. No backpack, no hiking boots, just dirty sneakers. He didn't look like he belonged out there. He noticed me immediately and stood up. Not slowly either, just a sudden motion like he'd been waiting for me. I stopped mid-step, my eyes locked on him. My husky, oblivious to the shift in my posture, wagged her tail and started pulling toward him, excited like always. She made a little whining sound and tried to cross in front of me. He didn't smile or wave or act casual. He just started walking straight toward me like he expected me to wait. I turned around without saying anything and pulled my husky back down the trail. My heart was already racing. I told myself not to panic yet, that maybe he was just weird and harmless, but I didn't like the way he stood or the way he looked at me. I could hear his footsteps behind us. At first it was distant, then faster, closer. I didn't want to run and make it obvious I was scared, but I picked up my pace. I could hear gravel crunching under his shoes. Who hikes in worn-out sneakers and drinks beer in the sun? He started calling out to me. Not shouting, just saying things in a normal tone like he wanted to make conversation. But it wasn't friendly. It was intrusive. He asked where I was from, if I was hiking alone, if I was planning on going to the reservoir. I didn't answer. I didn't even turn around. I just kept walking faster. My husky kept looking back, confused, her tail still wagging. The trail curved and started to climb steeply. Rocky steps, loose gravel, the kind of incline that forces you to slow down. I thought maybe the hill would discourage him, but I could hear him still coming. Slower, but steady. It was a hard hike even in proper boots, and I could hear him breathing heavily, dragging his feet. We kept climbing for what felt like forever. The air was getting warmer. I was sweating, but didn't stop to drink. I didn't want to give him a chance to close the gap. I looked over my shoulder and saw him maybe 30 feet back, still following. Not close enough to reach me, but too close to feel safe. Eventually, the trail reached a spot where it split. One path kept going up toward the top of the ridge, the other dropped sharply down the opposite side, back toward where we'd come from. In between was a patch of thick brush, mostly dry chaparral and some low oaks. That's when I made a decision. I yanked my husky off the trail and into the brush, dragging her behind me. She was confused and hesitant but followed. We crouched low and pushed our way deep into the shrubs, branches scratching my arms, dead twigs cracking under our weight. I found a shallow dip in the ground behind a cluster of rocks and we ducked down, trying not to make a sound. My husky tried to wiggle forward toward the trail, still thinking she'd missed her chance for pets. I held her collar tight and waited. A few minutes later, I heard his footsteps again. Slower now. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, listening. He paused right at the fork. I could hear him shifting his weight, pacing a little. Then I heard his steps move again, this time going up. He took the path toward the ridge, the steeper, more difficult climb. I waited until I couldn't hear him anymore. Even then I stayed hidden another 5 or 10 minutes, just in case he doubled back. My arms were scratched up, and my husky was panting hard, confused, and a little frustrated. Eventually, I slowly crawled out of the brush, checked both trails, and didn't see or hear anything. I took the lower path, the one that led back down, moving quickly and quietly. I didn't care about finishing the loop anymore. I just wanted to get back to the main trail and put as much distance between me and that man as possible. We moved fast on the way down. I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him again. But the trail stayed empty. No voices, no movement, just the sounds of my own breath and the steady crunch of my boots. My husky seemed to sense my change in energy finally. Her ears were back, her tail lowered. She didn't try to say hi to anyone after that. When I reached the original trailhead and stepped back into the main part of the park, I felt like I could finally breathe. There were people now. Not many, but enough to make me feel less vulnerable. A couple with a toddler in a backpack passed me on the trail. An older man with walking sticks nodded hello. I made my way to my car as fast as I could, unlocked the doors, and got inside. I locked the doors immediately, just sat there for a second, holding the steering wheel with both hands while my husky flopped onto the back seat like nothing had happened. I didn't call the cops. I didn't report it. I didn't know what I would have said. He didn't touch me, didn't threaten me, technically didn't even break a law. But something about that man was wrong. The way he acted, the way he kept following even when I clearly didn't want anything to do with him. The fact that he kept climbing up that steep trail in jeans and sneakers, like it didn't matter how hard it was, just that he kept me in sight. I never took that trail again. Now I don't hike alone anymore. Not even short ones. My husky might be sweet, but she's no protector. My lab mix would have at least growled, barked, something. But she's 14 now and can't manage the heat or the climbs anymore. I wait for my boyfriend's days off if I want to hike, or we pick busier trails. I carry a knife and pepper spray every time, even on short loops. That day scared me more than I want to admit because it reminded me that sometimes the scariest things aren't wild animals or getting lost or twisting an ankle miles from help. Sometimes it's the people who don't belong out there. The ones who show up where they shouldn't be, wearing the wrong clothes, asking the wrong questions, not stopping when they're supposed to. I was lucky that day. I think about how easily it could have gone another way, and I'll never forget the sound of his footsteps getting closer. I live in the mountains, so hiking is just part of my life now. It's something I do often, sometimes every day if the weather's good. I know the trails like the back of my hand. My partner and I hike together most of the time, but there are mornings when we split up. They're a stronger hiker and usually jog or run up the steeper parts while I take my time. I have asthma, and over the years I've learned to listen to my body. Running just isn't something I can do anymore, not comfortably, and especially not uphill. So, we usually agree on a point halfway up a trail where they'll wait for me. Sometimes we'll hike down together from there, or keep going up depending on the time and how we're feeling. That's just been our routine for a while now. It's worked for us. That morning started like a lot of others. It was early, just before sunrise. We had plans to squeeze in a quick hike before heading off to work. The air was cold in that dry mountain way, crisp enough to bite the skin on your face, but not so cold that you'd need more than a couple of layers. I had my usual setup. Wool base layer, soft shell jacket, small pack with water, a snack bar, and my inhaler. My partner had on their running vest and a light fleece and took off jogging up the trail once we crossed the lot. We agreed they'd wait at the big switchback halfway up. I stayed behind and hiked at my regular pace. The trail we picked that morning was one we'd done dozens of times before. It winds up through thick pine forest for the first mile or so, with occasional breaks in the trees where you can see the valley below. Normally, that early in the morning, the forest is alive with sound. Chickadees calling, squirrels rustling the underbrush, sometimes even woodpeckers tapping away. But that morning was different. It was quiet. Not silent in the way that fresh snow makes things feel soft and still, but silent in a way that felt off. Unsettling. I kept expecting to hear something, anything, but there was nothing. No birds. No squirrels. Just the sound of my own boots on the trail and my breath, steady and controlled. I kept hiking. I tried not to let the silence get to me. I can get anxious, especially when I'm out in the woods alone, and I know that. I try to brush it off as just that, me overthinking. I told myself it was probably just the cold or the time of day. Maybe everything was still waking up. But even thinking that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I reached a part of the trail where it curves along a hillside, with low brush growing tight to the edges. You can't see far ahead in that section. The plants grow thick there, and the trail narrows slightly. I was walking slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady. Then I heard something. It was low and rough. Not loud, but enough to stop me in my tracks. It sounded like a growl. My whole body stiffened. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. The brush was thick and still. My first thought, again, was that I was just imagining it. Maybe it was the wind dragging through the branches or something in the trees. Just to be safe, I cleared my throat loudly. It's something I do when I want to let wildlife know I'm there. I figured if it was a coyote or even a bear or deer bedded down in the brush, the sound might startle it and make it move. But nothing happened. The brush stayed still. No noise. I didn't see anything run. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting. Then I kept walking. I made it about 100 feet further, still uneasy, when my partner came running down the trail toward me. They weren't jogging anymore. They were moving fast, and their face was pale. They looked scared. They didn't stop when they reached me, just grabbed my arm and kept going past me. I turned around and followed, and only then did they speak. There was a cougar on the trail, they said, just standing there in the middle of the path. Later, when we were back at the car, they explained the whole thing. They had reached the halfway point and decided not to wait. It was colder than expected, and they didn't want to cool down too much. So they had started hiking back toward me. A few minutes down the trail, right before that thick brushy turn, they rounded a bend and came face to face with a cougar. It was sniffing something on the trail, maybe scat or an old scent. It hadn't noticed them right away. But when it did, it jumped back a little, turned, and ran down the trail, the same direction I had just come from. I think I must have passed it. I don't know how close I got. I don't know if it was in the brush when I heard that sound or if it had already moved by then. But I think I was within feet of it. That low growl, it makes sense now. It wasn't my imagination. It was real, and it was close. We didn't stop to talk or look around after that. We just kept moving. Fast. Neither of us ran, but we didn't exactly walk, either. We stuck together, shoulder to shoulder, until we got back to the trailhead. When we finally sat in the car, hands shaking, we didn't say much. There wasn't anything to say that could really capture how close that felt. It didn't attack us. It didn't stalk us or make any threatening moves. But it was there. Wild. Strong. Quiet. And we never even knew it until it was already behind us. Since then, we've changed how we hike. We don't split up anymore, not even on trails we've done 100 times. If one of us wants to move faster, we both slow down. It's not worth the risk. We've seen cougar prints in the snow more than once on that same trail. Once, we saw a clear set of tracks crossing the path near the top, where the pines open up and the wind cuts through. Another time, we saw scat in the middle of the trail, still warm. It's not a question of whether they're out there. They are. And they're probably watching long before we ever know. There's something about that moment, walking in silence, thinking I was alone, while something watched me from the brush, that has stuck with me. Not in a dramatic way, not something that gives me nightmares or keeps me from the woods, but in a way that's grounded. Real. A reminder that these places we move through, these forests and trails we think we know, belong to more than just us. We're visitors. No matter how familiar the path feels, there are things out there watching from just beyond the trees. Now, when it gets too quiet, when that uneasy silence settles over the forest, we turn around. We hike home. We don't talk ourselves out of what we feel. Instinct counts for something out there. I've learned that the hard way. I still love the woods. I still hike almost every day, but I carry a different kind of awareness with me now. It's quieter than fear, but just as sharp. It happened a few years ago when I was on a solo hiking trip in the northwest of Ireland. I had a few days off from work and decided to spend them exploring some remote countryside areas I hadn't been to before. I'm not a mountaineer or anything, but I've always liked going off on my own, following sheep trails or old stone walls that wind their way through the hills. The kind of places where you don't see anyone for hours, sometimes even a whole day. Ireland has a lot of these kinds of places, where the land just rolls on, dotted with bits of bog, long grass, collapsed stone sheds, and the occasional rusted gate to nowhere. I'd been walking since mid-morning, the sun mostly hidden behind clouds, but it wasn't raining. The wind was steady though, tugging at my coat and whistling through the taller grass. I didn't have a strict route. I had a basic map in my bag and had roughly planned to circle back to my parked car by evening. It was peaceful out there. No cars, no people, just the occasional call of birds and the distant bleating of sheep somewhere in the next field. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring after a while. Around early afternoon, maybe 2 or 3 p.m., I came up over a small ridge and saw something odd down in the next field. It was a house. Not a ruin or an old stone barn, but an actual, standing, lived-in house. A one-story place with white walls, a sloped roof, and a small, square fenced garden around it. There was no driveway, no visible road leading to it. Just this strange little building sitting alone in the middle of the field. Not even trees around it. The nearest cluster of anything was probably a half-hour's walk back. What really made me stop, though, were the 3 large luggage bags in the yard. They were zipped open and dumped near the fence like someone had just tossed them from the house. Clothes were strewn all over the grass, caught on the fence wire, flapping in the wind. Shirts, jeans, underwear just scattered and dirty. A small silver car, something like a Honda Jazz, was parked just inside the fence, angled like it had been driven in quickly, and then abandoned. I stood there for a minute, maybe longer, just staring. There was no movement from the house, no signs of anyone coming or going. No smoke from a chimney, no lights in the windows. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of me. I thought maybe someone had broken down and was waiting for help, or maybe it was some kind of emergency. I figured if someone needed help, they'd probably be glad someone had come by, even if I couldn't do much beyond offer to call someone once I got back to signal. So I stepped over a low section of the fence and made my way toward the car, not really trying to be quiet but not stomping either. The clothes on the ground were dirty, but not old, like they'd only been there a day or 2. I noticed a toothbrush half buried in the mud, some packets of instant noodles, a worn-out shoe with no laces. As I got within about 10 meters of the car, I slowed down. Something felt wrong. Not scary yet, just off. Like the whole scene was too quiet. And then, without warning, this woman sat up in the back seat of the car. I jumped. Really jumped. My chest lurched, and I actually stumbled backward. She must have been lying down flat in the back seat, hidden from view. She didn't move beyond sitting up, just stared at me through the car window. Her face was blank, not angry or scared or surprised, just blank. Her eyes didn't even blink. Her hair was a dirty, matted mess that hung down the sides of her face, and her skin was pale but dirty, like she hadn't washed in a long time. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in days. Or eaten. She wasn't old, maybe mid-30s, but she looked worn out. Wrecked. She didn't wave, didn't say anything, didn't gesture. Just kept staring. I stood there for maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like a minute. I had this overwhelming feeling, hard to explain, that I should not be there. Not in a fearful, danger is right here way, but in a deep, instinctive get the fuck away from this place kind of way. My heart was thudding. I couldn't read her expression, because there wasn't one. Nothing. That still, lifeless stare. I backed away slowly at first, then turned and walked fast, almost breaking into a jog as I crossed the field and clambered back over the fence. I didn't look back until I was halfway up the hill again. From that distance, I could just barely make out the car through the fence slats. I didn't see her anymore. She was either lying down again or watching from behind the glass. I didn't go back to the trail after that. I changed direction completely, walking almost in a straight line across country until I hit a more familiar sheep path and eventually looped my way back to where I'd left my car. The whole walk back, I kept checking behind me, even though I knew it was unlikely she'd followed me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. That night, back at my uncle's place where I was staying, I told him and my cousins what I'd seen. I described the house, the car, the bags, the clothes all over the place, and especially the woman. I told them she looked homeless, or maybe on drugs, or just broken somehow. I said I thought someone should probably go check on her, maybe call the police to do a welfare check, or at least get someone out there to talk to her. But they kind of just shrugged it off. Said there were lots of odd people living out in the countryside. People who didn't want to be found, who lived without electricity or phones, on old inherited land or squatted properties. My uncle even joked that maybe she just wanted to be left alone and that I'd probably freaked her out as much as she had me. I didn't press the issue, though I still felt unsettled about it. I couldn't stop thinking about how she looked at me, not scared or curious, just blank. I kept thinking about the clothes, the toothbrush in the dirt, the way the car was parked at an angle like someone had driven it in fast and never left. I thought about the fact that it was the middle of the day and she had been lying down, completely hidden, not sleeping, just lying there in silence. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to go back. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just wanted to see if she was still there, if the scene looked any different. Maybe I'd make peace with it, or maybe get a better sense of what was going on. It took a while, but I retraced my steps and eventually found the same field. The house was still there, just as I remembered it. But the car was gone. Completely gone. Like it had never been there. No tire tracks, no sign of it having been towed or pushed. Just gone. But the clothes were still there, scattered around the garden, hanging on the fence wire, exactly like the day before. The luggage bags were still open. Nothing had moved. I didn't stay long. I didn't go near the house again, not after what happened. I just stood at a distance for a while, watched, listened. It was silent. Just the wind moving through the grass. I went back to my uncle's place and mentioned it again. Said the car was gone now. They barely reacted. Said maybe she'd moved on. Maybe someone picked her up. Maybe she was never supposed to be there in the first place. But they still didn't think it was worth calling the police. I tried a few days later to find the house on a map, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was. Those fields all looked the same from above, just green blotches and stone lines. I tried to follow it again once more before I left the area, but I never found that same field. I don't know if I took a wrong turn or just misjudged the location, but it felt like that place had vanished. To this day, I don't know what I walked into. Maybe she was squatting, maybe she was hiding, maybe she was running from something. I'll never know. But that look on her face, that blank stare in the middle of that empty land, with all those clothes fluttering like forgotten flags, I still think about it sometimes, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd walked closer. I'd been walking the southwest coast path for a few days, just me, my pack, and the endless coast stretching in either direction. Cornwall was always somewhere I'd wanted to explore properly. Not just quick weekend trips or postcard views, but slow, steady days of walking, really feeling the place. That stretch between Zenner and Porthras was meant to be beautiful, wild, exposed, rough in places, but worth it for the views alone. And it was. You're never far from the sound of the sea. Even when you're tucked behind a rise or hedgerow, you can hear it below, constant and heavy, always there. The morning had started out calm. Light wind, overcast but dry, the kind of cool air that makes you feel like you could walk forever. I had the trail completely to myself. I liked that part. The path hugged the land tightly, curling around coves and up and over headlands. On one side, fields and old stone walls. On the other, the cliff dropping straight into the rocks and the sea. At some points it was wide and flat. At others it narrowed, so much you had to watch your footing with every step. Erosion eats away at it bit by bit. You notice sections where the paths collapsed, fresh bits of fence driven in where someone's tried to block off the edge. I was winding around the shoulder of a hill when it happened. The slope of the path meant I couldn't see around the bend until I was already close. It curved sharply to the left, and just as I came around it, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, right on the path, maybe 10 feet ahead, was a cow and her calf. The cow, big, brown, maybe some mix of Hereford or South Devon, was lying down smack in the middle of the narrow trail, like it owned the place. Her body completely blocked the way forward. The calf, or bullock more accurately, was standing just in front of her. Still young, but big enough to be a problem. And it didn't look relaxed. To my right, about 3 feet away, the edge of the path dropped off sharply. 30, maybe 40 feet down, jagged rocks and foaming waves waited. The sea looked beautiful from up here, but you wouldn't survive a fall onto those rocks. To my left was a steep, bramble-covered hillside. Not something you'd casually walk up. The bushes were thick, spiny, and the angle was ridiculous. I stopped and stood still. Tried to think. I'd seen cows before. Walked past them in fields. They usually just stare or ignore you. But this calf was different. It locked eyes with me straight away, tail flicking. Then it lowered its head, almost like it was trying to make itself look bigger. It scraped a hoof against the ground, tossed its head, and gave out a short, angry huff. I didn't know if bullocks actually charged, but in that moment, I didn't want to find out. I stayed frozen for a second. The calf stepped forward. Just one step. But that was enough. I backed up, slowly, trying not to make sudden movements, glancing to the left. The hillside was steep, but it was the only real option. Going back meant losing a couple of hours of walking and finding a way to loop inland, which wasn't easy out here. I looked at the brambles and thought, maybe I can just push through a little bit, skirt around the cow, and rejoin the path ahead. I picked a spot where the growth looked slightly thinner, not clear, but less like a wall, and stepped off the trail. The moment I did, the calf let out another low huff and took 2 quick steps in my direction. That did it. I turned and scrambled. The hill was steeper than I thought. My boots kept slipping on loose soil beneath the brambles, and every step felt like I was getting dragged back down. The thorns tore at my legs, even through my trousers, and scratched my arms when I tried to push through. Every few feet, I had to pause to pull a branch away from my face or rip free from something grabbing my backpack straps. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't want to know if the bullock had followed, or if the mother had gotten up. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the wind and the crashing waves. I just kept pushing upward and sideways, trying to keep a mental image of where the path would be if I came around ahead of the animals. After what felt like 10 solid minutes of fighting my way through the thorns and underbrush, I found a slight clearing, a patch of rough grass and rock, open enough that I could finally stop and catch my breath. I looked back, panting. The path was below me, maybe 15 or 20 feet. I couldn't see the cow anymore. They were still back around the bend, blocked from view by the slope and bushes. My arms were bleeding in a few places. Thin red lines crisscrossed my forearms and hands. One bramble had ripped through my trouser leg and cut my shin. Nothing serious, but enough to sting. My backpack was scuffed, and one of the side pouches had been torn open. My water bottle was gone. I hadn't even noticed it fall. I sat down on a flat rock and let myself breathe properly for a minute or two. Everything stung. My heart was still racing, but it was slowing down. I felt stupid. I felt lucky. I felt a bit embarrassed too. I knew cows could be protective, but somehow I hadn't expected to feel actual danger on a walk like this. In the UK, the worst thing you expect to face is a wet foot or a dodgy pub lunch. But this was different. I wasn't in a field, able to back off or climb a gate. I was stuck on a thin ribbon of cliff edge with no good options. After a while, I stood and started cutting across the slope, trying to find a way back down to the path ahead of the cow. I moved slowly this time, more careful of the brambles and where I stepped. It took a while, but eventually I saw the trail again below me, wider now, curving gently up toward the next headland. No sign of the cow or the calf. I slid down a short bank of earth and landed back on the path, scratched and dirty, but back on track. I didn't relax properly until I was another mile or two along. That stretch had no animals, no sudden surprises. Just sea air, wind in the grass, and the smell of salt. I kept thinking back to the moment the calf scraped the ground, how close I was to the edge, how quickly it had gone from a calm walk to something that could have ended very differently. That night, I found a campsite inland and pitched my tent early. I cleaned my scratches and made some tea. As I sat there in my little camp chair watching the light fade, I kept thinking how strange it was that something so ordinary, a cow and her calf, had put me in the most dangerous situation I'd faced in years. And the scariest part was, it hadn't been dramatic. It had just been real. No wild animals, no weather turning on me, no freak accidents. Just the land, the path, and something that didn't want me to pass. I still walk the coast when I get the chance. I still love it. But now, whenever I round a blind bend or walk a narrow stretch with a steep drop on one side, I slow down. I listen. And I never, ever assume that just because I'm in England, it's going to be a safe walk. I used to do this thing where I'd get up super early, like stupid early, and hike to the top of this mountain near where I lived. The goal was always the same, to be up there right when the sun came up. That meant pulling into the parking area at the base around 3:45 a.m., sometimes a little earlier, depending on how fast I thought I'd hike that day. It was summer then, so sunrise was early, around 5:15 or so. I liked the quiet. I liked the cold air, and the feeling that I was doing something while the rest of the world was still asleep. But it always started out kind of eerie. That parking lot was small, just gravel and dirt, and tucked away at the edge of some dense trees. No lights, no rangers, no signs beyond the basic "trail starts here" wooden post. The only illumination came from my headlights and whatever moonlight was available. I always parked with the front of my car facing out, engine pointed toward the way I came in. Don't ask me why. I think it just made me feel like I could leave quickly if I needed to. I never saw anyone else parked there. Not at that time of day. Later in the morning, sure, but not that early. I'd sit in the car for a few minutes. Engine off, just letting my eyes adjust. I kept the dome light off, so I wouldn't kill my night vision. The windows would fog up fast from my breathing and the early morning chill. Sometimes I'd get this weird feeling, like someone was watching me from the trees. I never saw anything, never heard anything. But it's a strange feeling, knowing someone could have watched you pull in, someone standing still in the dark, and you'd never know they were there. The trail started off right from the lot. It wound through forest for the first mile, then opened up a bit where the trees thinned and the incline got more serious. I always wore a headlamp, but I kept it on the red light setting to preserve my vision and not startle animals. My boots made a soft crunch with every step on the dirt and loose gravel. It was dead quiet except for that. No birds, yet no wind. Just me and the sound of my own movement. I was maybe 20 minutes in when I got that feeling again, like I wasn't alone. It wasn't a sound. It was more like a sudden awareness, like something behind me wasn't right. I kept walking but slowed down. I don't know why I looked back, I usually didn't, but something made me turn. Just a glance over my shoulder, halfway expecting to see nothing. That's when I saw it. A tiny, faint blue light, maybe 30 feet behind me and low to the ground. At first I thought it might be a reflection or some kind of trail marker I'd never noticed, but it moved. It swayed slightly, up and down, like someone walking. That's when I realized it looked exactly like the glow of a Bluetooth headset. One of those small ones people wear on their ear. Just the light, not the shape of the person. Nothing else was visible. The trees and the darkness swallowed everything but that tiny blue. I stopped. My heart started pounding, not because of the climb, but because it hit me all at once just how alone I was. No one knew where I was, not exactly. No cell service this deep in. I hadn't seen another car. And someone was behind me, walking, quietly. I turned off my headlamp and crouched down just off the trail behind a boulder. I wanted to see if whoever it was would pass me, or if they would stop. The blue light kept moving slowly and then it stopped too. About 10 feet from where I had just been walking. No footsteps. No breathing. Nothing. I waited. Maybe 2 minutes. It felt like 20. Then the light moved again. Closer. This time I could hear very faint steps, deliberate, careful. That made it worse, honestly. Someone trying not to be heard. My legs were shaking, and not from the cold. I started running all the scenarios in my head. If they had a weapon. If they were just waiting for me to stop. If they'd followed me from the parking lot without me knowing. I couldn't see their face. I couldn't even see their outline. Just that one stupid blue light. But then slowly they came into view. Just enough light from the faint moon glow filtering through the trees to make out a shape. A man. Average height. Wearing a small backpack. No flashlight. Just that blinking headset light. He was hiking. Just like me. Just walking, head down, not even looking around. I waited until he was a good distance ahead before I stood up. He hadn't seen me. I'm pretty sure of that. I got back on the trail and kept moving slower now, keeping my distance. Every few minutes I'd see that blue light up ahead, never turning back, never stopping. We both reached the summit about 15 minutes before the sun came up. It's a wide, flat clearing at the top with big rock slabs and just a touch of breeze. You can see the entire valley stretch out below, farms, a winding river, rooftops in the distance. The early light was just barely starting to tint the sky when I got there. The man was standing a ways off, facing east, same as me. I stayed far from him, picking a spot on the opposite side. I never spoke to him. He never looked at me. We watched the sunrise in silence. And that was it. Eventually he turned and started back down without a word. I waited until he was long gone before I followed. Never saw him again. But the whole way down, I couldn't stop thinking about how stupid I'd been. Hiking alone, in the dark, before even the birds were awake. No one would have heard me scream. No one would have found me until someone else happened to show up. And what shook me most wasn't that it turned out fine, it was how close it had come to not being fine, and how little I could have done if it hadn't been. That feeling stuck with me. I still hike, but I don't go before sunrise anymore. I don't go alone. I don't assume that just because I'm doing something harmless, everyone else out there is too. That tiny blue light showed me exactly how vulnerable I was, even on a trail I knew by heart, even in a place I loved. It was a harmless encounter, yeah. But that morning, for the stretch of time between when I saw that light and when he passed me by, I knew what fear felt like in its rawest form. Not panic, not horror, just that cold realization that I had no control out there. None. And ever since, I've kept that in mind. Nature is beautiful. It's also indifferent. And sometimes so are the people in it. We were 17, and it was one of those late August days where the air sticks to your skin and the bugs seem to know you're a little too warm already. My friend and I had just started our senior year of high school, and we were trying to squeeze in one last hike before things got too busy. She had found a trailhead in the Mark Twain National Forest and said it looked lightly used but cool. I didn't question it. I liked being outdoors, and I trusted her. We packed water, a couple of granola bars, bug spray, and a paper map I had folded and tucked into my back pocket just in case. Cell phones didn't do much back then, especially not out in the woods, so that little compass clipped to my backpack was our best tool. The trail started off well enough. A little overgrown, sure, but it was marked here and there by old wooden posts and faint worn paths in the grass. The humidity was brutal. Sweat pooled under my shirt and trickled down my spine. Every few steps we'd be brushing spiderwebs off our arms or swatting mosquitoes from our necks. But we were talking nonstop, college plans, some kid in our math class who'd already wrecked his car, teachers we hated, teachers we weirdly liked. We didn't pay enough attention to where our feet were taking us. Maybe half an hour passed before I started feeling like something was off. The trail got narrower, softer, more broken up by roots and mud. There were no more trail markers. I paused to look around and realized we hadn't seen one in a while. We stopped walking and took a good look around. Everything was green. Thick, leafy brush and tall grass crowded in on all sides. The sun pressed through the canopy in patches, but even that light felt kind of muted, like it couldn't break through the weight of the forest. I pulled out the map and tried to get my bearings. The main trail wasn't supposed to bend this sharply, and there were no creeks nearby, but we'd passed one just a few minutes earlier. It didn't take much to figure out we'd veered off. My friend shrugged and said it wasn't a big deal, that we could just keep going, and the trail would probably loop back or across a road. I didn't like it. The dirt underfoot looked more like it had been made by deer or something, not people. Still, it was better to keep moving than to backtrack without knowing for sure where we went wrong. So we walked. 15, 20 minutes passed. The woods thinned out just a little, and then all at once we stepped out of the trees and into an opening. I thought maybe we'd hit someone's property edge, or maybe a service road. But it wasn't that. It was a kind of neighborhood, or something that looked like one. The air felt stiller there, and something about the silence made my skin crawl. There were about 5 or 6 small buildings. Not cabins. Not trailers. More like thrown-together shelters. Tin roofs held down with cinder blocks. Wood slats missing on one side of a wall. Tarps strung over windows. Some looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Others had signs of life. Laundry hanging limp on a line. A rusted bike leaned against a stump. The faint sound of an old country song playing from somewhere I couldn't see. We didn't say anything. Just stood there, frozen. Then I saw the man. He was mowing a patch of yellow grass in front of one of the shacks. He wore a plain white tank top and sweatpants, dragging one of those old manual push mowers across the uneven lawn. No engine, just metal wheels and a spinning blade. He didn't look up at us, but I guess that didn't matter because my friend was already walking toward him. I hissed her name, but she didn't turn around. I stood there, stunned, clutching my map, trying to figure out if we should just turn around and run. My gut was screaming that we shouldn't be there, that we had crossed some invisible line, that this wasn't a place hikers should end up in. But she reached him, and I saw them talking. He stopped mowing and leaned on the handle. I couldn't hear what was being said. I could only watch her gesture back toward me, pointing to the woods, then back to the man. After a minute, she turned and waved for me to come over. I didn't move. She walked back halfway and said, "He says he can give us a lift to the parking lot. Says it's just up the road." That's when I saw it, an old gray van parked beside one of the shacks. No windows in the back, doors wide open, the inside full of who knows what. My chest tightened. Everything in me told me this wasn't right, that it didn't matter how hot we were or how tired. We needed to find our way back through the woods. I said no. I told her we should just backtrack, but she was already climbing into the back of the van. She laughed a little and told me I was being paranoid, said it would take us too long to walk. And I stood there, thinking. My friend, sitting inside a stranger's van in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. I looked back at the woods. I couldn't let her go alone, so I climbed in, too. The van smelled like oil and mildew. There were bungee cords hanging from hooks, some rope coiled under a crate, a pair of boots tossed into a corner. No seats in the back, just carpet that had probably once been blue. The man got in, shut the door, and drove. We didn't talk. He didn't turn the radio on. The road we were on was bumpy, narrow, cracked. Trees passed by on both sides. I kept trying to recognize landmarks. My heart didn't slow the whole time. Finally, after what felt like way too long, I saw the faded wooden sign for the trailhead lot come into view. I didn't breathe until the van rolled to a stop. We climbed out, thanked him, and watched him drive away. I didn't yell at my friend right away. We got into my car and sat for a moment. The forest around us felt thicker than before, like it was holding something back. I started the car and pulled out onto the road, not speaking until we were well out of the park and driving past houses again. I told her that couldn't ever happen again, that we got lucky, that guys like that don't always take you where they say they will, that we didn't know what that place was, and that next time we follow the damn trail and pay attention. She didn't argue. She just nodded. I think the silence in that van got to her, too. It wasn't just the man, or the weird collection of buildings, or how easily we had gotten turned around. It was the realization that something could have happened, and no one would have known where to even begin looking. We didn't go hiking again for a while after that. And when we did, we stuck to marked trails, stuck together, and stuck to our gut when something felt wrong. I still think about that day more than I like to admit. Not because anything bad happened, but because of how easily it could have. It was a Sunday morning when I decided to head out for a solo hike. I'd been feeling a bit overwhelmed with work and needed some time away from screens, noise, and people. There's this regional park I like going to not too far from home, but big enough that you can go hours without running into anyone if you take the side trails. That's what I was aiming for. Just me, the woods, and some quiet. I started out early, probably around 7:30 a.m. The sun was already up, and the day was warming quickly. I parked in the small lower lot and followed the paved trail for a while. There were a few joggers and dog walkers around, the usual for that time of morning. After about 20 minutes, I came to one of the less maintained paths that cut off to the right and dipped into a denser, shaded part of the park. I hesitated for a second, mostly out of habit, then stepped off the pavement and onto the dirt trail. Right away, it felt different. The air was cooler, and the tree canopy blocked a lot of the sunlight. I could hear birds calling and small things scuttling through the brush. The ground was uneven, rocks sticking out here and there, with dry leaves and pine needles crunching under my boots. I liked it though. I've always preferred places that feel a little wilder. I kept hiking, following the twists and turns of the trail, not really worried about where I was going since I had a map and had hiked parts of this area before. An hour passed then too. I didn't see a single person. That was fine with me. That's what I'd wanted. Just peace, trees, and the rhythm of my own breathing. Around mid-morning, I came to a fork in the trail. One path curved uphill through a narrow pass between two rocky outcrops. The other dipped down into a ravine I didn't recognize. I pulled off to the side and sat on a flat boulder to check my map and drink some water. I'd just taken my pack off and was unfolding the map when I heard something strange. It was a low, rhythmic sound, like heavy breathing or huffing. At first, I thought it might be my own breath echoing in my ears, but I held my breath for a second and it kept going. I froze, head tilted slightly, listening hard. The sound was close. Not right next to me, but close enough that I could hear the wet inhale-exhale pattern. Definitely not human. Not loud, but solid. Real. I scanned the trees around me. The trail behind and ahead of me was empty. No movement in the immediate brush. I turned slowly in a full circle, my eyes jumping from bush to tree to rock, but saw nothing. My skin had gone cold even though I'd been sweating moments earlier. The back of my neck prickled, and my body had that deep animal sense of being watched, even if my eyes couldn't see anything. I stood up and cleared my throat loudly. The sound stopped. I stayed still for a few more seconds. No more breathing. No more sound at all, in fact. The birds that had been chirping earlier had gone quiet. That silence, it wasn't natural. It was thick, tense, like the woods were holding their breath. I tried to act calm, but I could feel the panic start to rise. Without really thinking it through, I picked up a thick branch that had fallen nearby, maybe 3 feet long and solid as a baseball bat. I turned toward a nearby boulder and swung it hard against the rock. It cracked loud, really loud, and echoed through the trees. A second later, I heard crashing through the underbrush off to my right. Something big took off. It wasn't the quick rustle of a deer or the soft padding of a rabbit. This was heavy, branches snapping, ground thudding, like something running with weight behind it. A flock of birds exploded out of the trees in that direction, their wings flapping in a frenzy as they rose into the air and disappeared. I didn't wait. I shoved the stick through the loop on my pack so I could carry it easily, slung the pack on my back, and started walking fast, faster than I normally would on uneven trail. I didn't run, but every part of me wanted to. I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning the brush for any sign of movement. I couldn't shake the image of something watching me from behind a tree, waiting for me to let my guard down. About 10 minutes later, I crossed a shallow, mostly dried up creek bed. There was some soft mud left in the middle. I happened to glance down and saw what looked like a large paw print in the mud. It wasn't fresh, but it was clear. For toes, no claw marks, wide pad. Definitely a cat. My chest tightened. It looked like a mountain lion print. I'm not a big person, 5 feet 4 inches, maybe 120 pounds on a good day, and I didn't have anything on me for real protection. Just a small multi-tool in my side pouch, and I'd forgotten my bigger knife in my other pack. I hadn't thought I'd need it for a simple morning hike. I suddenly felt incredibly vulnerable. My ears strained for any sound behind me. Every shadow looked like it was hiding something. I kept walking. The trail started climbing again, and I recognized part of the path from an earlier hike. I knew I was maybe 30 or 40 minutes from the main trail loop, and once I got there, it would only be another 15 minutes back to the car. That gave me some hope, but not enough to let my guard down. All the way back, I kept turning to check behind me. I started clapping every couple minutes, loud and sudden, just to make noise. I'd heard that mountain lions usually avoid humans unless they feel cornered or are really desperate, and that noise can help drive them off. Still, knowing that and feeling safe were two different things. Eventually, I made it to the main trail. I could hear people in the distance, a couple voices, maybe some kids. I didn't see them, but just knowing others were around made me breathe a little easier. I still didn't slow down, though. I kept up my pace all the way to the lot. When I finally saw my car, I exhaled in a long, shaky breath. The lot had filled up since I'd arrived. Families unpacking coolers, people with strollers, joggers stretching. It felt like another world compared to where I'd just been. I threw my pack in the back seat and sat down in the front, locking the doors without even thinking. I sat there for a while. Engine off, windows cracked just a bit. My shirt was damp with sweat, and my hands were still shaking. It had been real. I knew that. It wasn't my imagination. Something had been close, too close. I thought about the breathing, the silence, the sound of it running, the paw print. I thought about how I'd almost stayed sitting there longer at that fork, maybe walked down the wrong trail. If I hadn't picked up that stick, hadn't made that noise, I don't know what would have happened. Probably nothing, but maybe something. That night, I cleaned out my hiking gear and made sure my knife was back in my pack. I added a whistle too, and a little air horn I had in my camping stuff. From now on, I told myself no more solo hikes without being fully prepared, even if it's just a morning in the local park. Nature doesn't care what your plan was. I still hike. I always will.
But I don't forget that day.
I don't forget the sound of that breathing, too deep, too close, and the feeling of something watching me, silent and hidden, just waiting.